But as we look closer, and especially people who see your movie, anyone of subpar intelligence can come to the conclusion that the bottom line here is that this is a humongous cash cow. That seems to be the reason behind it. It has nothing to do with global warming. If you can control the food, like you mentioned earlier, you got everything covered. When you
Go ahead.
No, go for it.
Well, I mean, you're absolutely correct. So that appears to be their cover story. And anytime what they're doing is selling these programs to the public as if they haven't started them. So they need public support. Anytime you do something that has the implications and risks with geoengineering, you have to sell it to the public before you let them know that it's going on. So again, they're using this fear that, hey, there's this huge threat of global warming and we need to save it from you. However, we know, again, it's part of weather modification. And again, the HARP program has earthquake technologies. Many people believe, including myself, the Japan earthquake and many of the other earthquakes that we've seen of recent have been part of this globalism, this attempt to consolidate power into certain areas. So it's being used as warfare applications. You had mentioned the food supply. One thing that I don't know if we covered, but is population reduction. And we know that that's an agenda by many of these same criminals who I spoke of, the Rockefellers, Rothschilds, Kissingers, and again, Bill Gates, who have an agenda to reduce the Earth's population dramatically because they're, again, looking for control. And it's difficult to control several billion people, but if you can get that number down below 1 billion, it's much more easy to control that population, and that's what they're looking for.
Yeah, definitely. And I do want to get into eugenics as well, but I want to use this kind of as a platform to get in there. Going back to the meeting there for the American Association for the Advancement of Science, one of the leading scientists there at the meeting, his name was David Keith. He was a leading scientist and expert in the field of geoengineering. And questions were brought to David Keith about concerns about human health and the implications that a program of this magnitude could have on human health. And his answers to these inquiries were quite intriguing. Do you want to tell us here in Radioland what he actually said about that?
Well, and that was really what blew the whole story out. And I do want to say that's why the article was so popular, because I broke the story on the use of aluminum in geoengineering models. Aluminum's been, again, found in thousands of times the normal amounts in rain and snow, thus toxifying soils and human health around the world. So it was really the smoking gun. They unleashed their proposals for aluminum at that meeting. So we brought video cameras in there. By the way, I'm banned from any future geoengineering conferences. They will not let me or any other independent reporters in. But after they had spoken about this and the fact that aluminum should be used in these models because it has 4 times the amount of reflectivity, 12 times the coagulation rate, meaning that it will stay up in the sky for longer, so it would more suitable to block our sun. Dane Wigington, who's a solar expert, used to work at Bechtel, and by the way, he's lost over 50% of his solar power in the past 6 years.
Oh my God!
Because of these trails, he oftentimes has to use a generator. Anyways, he asked David Keith, he said, so you're telling me that 10 to 20 million tons of aluminum oxide dumped into our sky would have no human health implications? David Keith froze.
Right.
He tried to sidestep it, and Dane asked him again. So he said, let me ask you again. Are you telling me that dumping 10 to 20 million tons of aluminum would have no human health or implications to the ecology? And David Keith just froze, looked like he was called out, and he said, well, aluminum, we've only begun to research and publish nothing, so there might be something terrible that we could find tomorrow. Of course, that was a blatant lie, because we showed a report that is readily available from credible scientists about the toxicity of the aluminum oxide nanoparticles, exactly what they were proposing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very interesting, and we put that in the film, and that was really the smoking gun for the programs. We blew the whistle, and we busted them.
Definitely. So speaking of health concerns, David Keith Maybe we can go backtrack there and talk about Bill Gates, like you mentioned, and eugenics. What's the story there?
Well, it's interesting. Many people know that the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, Kissinger, even John Holdren, who's Obama science czar, who's written Ecoscience. It was a book about how to reduce the population, putting things in the water to decrease fertility. But many people are unaware that Bill Gates' family has a history of eugenics. They believe he was some nerd that started Microsoft, in a garage and just got lucky and now is rich. And that may be true, but we highly doubt it because we know that his father was in part, involved with these people who call themselves the elite. I call them many different things. Unfortunately, we can't talk about that on the radio because it would be inappropriate. But Bill Gates' father worked very closely with the founder of Planned Parenthood, who is Margaret Sanger. Uh-huh. Margaret Sanger established Planned Parenthood and has spoken publicly about this for the purpose of reducing the African American population in the inner cities, which is absolutely eugenics. So that's the link with Bill Gates that many people are unaware of. Of course, I want to reiterate that Bill Gates, again, is a funder into geoengineering programs. It wasn't public. We knew about it, but it wasn't public until January, so we were unable to put that aspect in the film. However, we can talk about it now, and it's very open, and it can be found on the internet and from many different sources, including David Keith's website from the University of Calgary.
That's a pretty tall claim there to mention Planned Parenthood and an attack on the African American population. Has that been substantiated?
In terms of Bill Gates' father and his involvement with Planned Parenthood?
Well, just the fact that it was an attack on population control of the African American community.
Oh, absolutely. And Margaret Sanger is literally quoted, and you can find her saying this on the internet. We've established Planned Parenthood, and I quote, to get rid of, quote unquote, the Negro problem. So
Good
these
Lord.
are people who believe that there's a superior race. They believe that people of different ethnicities should not be around and do not deserve to live. And,
Wow.
For the record, I want to say I definitely feel different. I believe in equality. I believe in life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for each and every one of us. Unfortunately, there are people that believe completely different, and that's why we have such programs being carried out that are meant to destroy the health of those of us who stand for life.
Yeah, her statements, the Planned Parenthood thing, kind of reminds me of something I read about previous in history in the Nazi fascist state, coincidentally. Very interesting connection there. We won't go into that because my belief systems probably can't be broadcasted either about all that. So how deep does it go with the health implications? I know that in California there were some studies that show that had shown that dementia seemed to be on like a meteoric rise.
Well, and it's not only here in California, but everywhere. And
really?
Aluminum is very toxic. Of course, we interviewed some aluminum experts and physicians who specialize in aluminum, and they all told us the same thing. Aluminum is related to Alzheimer's. Of course, aluminum-related illnesses have gone through the roof in about the past 12 to 15 years since these programs have been started. Here in L.A. County, we've seen over a 200% increase in Alzheimer's.
Wow.
In a 10-year period. So we've seen a dramatic increase in aluminum, and then you had mentioned dementia and other neurological disorders, which are very common today, which were not common just 15 or 20 years ago. So aluminum is very toxic, and it also builds up in the body, so it will compromise the immune system. So we know aluminum is extremely toxic. That cannot be disputed. But barium, people have been now getting blood tests and finding 10 to 12 times the normal amount of barium in their system. Of course, barium is a main ingredient in the aerosol spraying. Barium is very toxic, and what it can do and what it does, barium lowers our immune system. So as a result, we've seen a number of increased all kinds of illnesses on the increase. Barium also raises blood pressure and does a number of other things. It's very interesting because on heavy spray days, people report irritability, headaches, dry mouth, exactly what barium poisoning or an excess barium would do. And we spoke to many physicians, emergency room physicians, who are aware of the aerosol spraying, and they stated during heavy spray days, we expect our emergency rooms to be packed. And barium, I don't know if I said this, increases blood pressure. So
right.
During heavy spray days, people come in with heart attacks and also strokes. So fatigue, other things that are really concerning. So, and the other thing, strontium, which is being found again in massive quantities, and we know is in the mix of this, is a carcinogen. So it's a catalyst to cancer, which, again, we've seen a dramatic increase in the past 12 to 15 years since the inception of these programs. All of these things, and we know that they're even spraying more than that. We only covered these three in the film. Inhaled on a daily basis, which we are inhaling, will compromise the immune system and lead to a lot of other health problems. One thing that I forgot to mention was respiratory mortality. Respiratory mortality went from number 8 on the list of mortality down to number 3 in the past 6 years. So we've seen a dramatic increase in respiratory-related illnesses. Of course, most of your listeners probably know many people and who have children are realizing that their children have respiratory problems. We believe that most of those are related to the particulate that they're inhaling.
Yeah, that reminds me of when you were visiting the community in Hawaii, when one of the youngest children there in the community was tested for levels of aluminum and other heavy elements, and the findings were really terrifying because those numbers were like, hundreds of times higher than they should have been?
Well, they were almost off the charts, and to bring you back to Hawaii, it's a very organic, all-natural, or was an all-natural environment. There was a 4-year-old who was tested for aluminum and a number of other heavy metals. This child never had a vaccine and has been growing up literally off of the land. Now, there shouldn't be any aluminum, or very low levels. There are normal amounts of aluminum that we should have in hair follicle tests and lead and other things. Her numbers were off of the charts. And again, she's had no vaccines or anything else. Many people around the world now are getting hair follicle tests and blood tests, which again reveal very high levels of aluminum, barium, strontium, and other heavy metals believed to be from these programs. So I would encourage the listeners who might be questioning this or might even be wondering if they're getting affected by this, to go ahead and get a blood test or get a hair follicle test for these things. And then if the levels are high, which everyone that I know who has tested has had levels off of the chart, look to various chelation and techniques to remove these metals out of the body. That's extremely important.
Yeah, this is insanity. I guess processed foods plus pharmaceuticals plus chemtrails equals severe Earth extinction issues. This is not a small issue. This affects the entire planet. And we have no idea how deep it may even go at every level. What are some of the signs, the visual signs, if someone was to walk outside and they were thinking maybe they were being sprayed? What do the chemtrails look like? What are the signs that, I know, but listeners out there might want to know some visuals on that. What should they look for?
Right, great question. What you should look for is a long, lingering trail that usually goes from horizon to horizon. And what it does, essentially, when it falls out, it spreads out. And typically, like here in L.A., you'll see 9 o'clock in the morning when they usually start spraying. It'll be a sunny day, but you see a bunch of crisscrossing trails. And usually by about 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, our sun is completely blocked out because those trails, again, fall out and spread out. So that's what you look for. It's not at all what a contrail is. A contrail can be seen typically when an airplane flies at a certain elevation. It's a small tail behind an airplane. It's ice crystals from the heat of the exhaust of the airplane. Usually dissipates in about 4 to 5 seconds. Doesn't linger in the sky for several hours and completely block out the sun. A contrail is real similar to when we breathe in cold weather. You can see your breath for a couple of seconds and then it quickly disappears. So the what many people call chemtrails, or trails from stratospheric aerosol geoengineering programs, again, are the long, lingering trails that we typically see about 4 to 5 days here around the U.S. and many other countries. And I know that you're calling from Canada, and I get reports every day from the heavy aerosol spraying in that region as well.
Any specific areas of Canada that come to mind?
Go ahead and name them off.
Yeah.
Calgary, I know is a big area. I'm not too familiar with